Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Don't Panic. Today, we're talking about an article that has gotten a lot of buzz from the New York Times called the Gen X Career Meltdown. That immediately, when read it, I had to send it to Jen and several other people I know because I felt like as I was reading it, I was just nodding all the way through. And I think you were as well.
Yeah, I couldn't believe not only how close it was to conversations we've had, but also, things you hear from people all through your network.
And we'll be posting a gift link to the article if you haven't read it yet. But basically, the article went through sort of why Gen X is feeling a midlife crisis and talking about how, especially for people in creative career fields like us, but people in other career fields probably are feeling this as well. That kind of that we were expecting to be editor in chief of some fancy magazine at this point and having fancy lunches together and that is not quite how our careers ended up. And it was very interesting because this came out just as I was doing a big declutter and found a whole bunch of old contracts for articles I wrote, and I realized that I am getting paid less per article than I was back at the start of my career, which was really horrifying to me.
I think what's interesting for me, at least, is I think we both had this feeling like, okay, we pivoted from paper to online. We pivoted from online to mobile. And you just kind of had this sense that we've made all these changes along the way. How can it be that now this new thing is happening that's going to steamroll all of the progress that we made in our careers up to now? Because that's kind of what it feels like when you read the article that, AI is coming to take your job and your lunch. I think what makes it interesting is when you see it in the New York Times as something that everybody seems to be going through right now is this feeling that um, you're not going to be able to pivot fast enough to keep up, that, the job is gone and is never coming back.
Right, and especially, yeah, we've reached a certain, and I think it's happening to millennials and Gen Z as well. Like, I don't think this is just a Gen X issue, but we're starting to reach that age where could it be ageism? It might, and it definitely, probably also is an issue of, our expertise and experience costs more than paying someone fresh out of college. And obviously, sometimes they don't want to pay the price.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of ties into what I was saying too about you just thought when you got to a certain stage that things would get easier, and they had, in fact, have not. Not for us, and I don't really think they're easier for anyone. It's just we had this idea that if you pay your dues now, later, and we're hitting later and discovering that, Gen Z and millennials are just learning it earlier. They didn't hold on to the dream for quite as long before they found out that the hustle never ends. But
Right, right, and and it's coming at not a great time, and we're trying to we're dealing with kids in college and talking about retirement and someday, but not today. So
yeah, no, it's really interesting. It's because it's kind of um, just wanting to plan for your future and when you can't see, when the horizon's really hazy. So I think it's scary to think that way, but what I think is exciting is that we've sort of come up with a way to help people see a way through in true don't panic style.
yes, we have a wonderful expert coming on in just a second, and she is going to talk us through not only for people in creative fields, although she is a career counselor for that, but also I think her advice will be important for anyone who is dealing with a career crisis. Maybe you've lost your job, maybe you're worried you're going to lose your job, or maybe you're just not feeling fulfilled in what you're doing. Is now the time to be looking? We're going to find out. So today we are welcoming to Don't Panic, Chandra Turner, aka the Talent Fairy, who has been a fantastic source for so many people, even way back in the day. She started Ed 2010 to help us all mentor each other and network when we were all in magazines. And in 2019, she moved that into Talent Fairy and went into career coaching full time. So hopefully she can help us through the Gen X midlife crisis that we're all going through, as brought to us by the New York Times. So, um,
Yeah, I'd love to get started with. I think one of the things that's interesting is even in Lisa's intro, it's this idea that over the course of your career, you've transitioned. So, would you say what's going on right now with Gen X is different from, say, when we went from print to online, or is it just a new day?
Oh, I think it's just a new day. I mean, I think that it's change begets change begets change. And we've been, I think that's what's kind of interesting about the New York Times article is that we did, most of us did adapt and were flexible and did change and move from print to digital and then digital to, whatever the hot thing was, video or podcast with video, so where we are now. Um, and we're just like, oh my gosh, I am trying to keep track of everything. I'm trying, to stay on top of the trends, especially the people that work in creative industry. Like those of it are good at it because we are paying attention to the cultural zeitgeist and we're moving with the wind. And it used to be that we actually created the wind, right? But now we're kind of at a point like, oh my gosh, I've done all of this. I've learned all of this. I've been paying attention and I still feel like I'm scrambling, right? And I think that that's the uncertainty. It's just not how we expected our lives to turn out, right? And not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just that like how we envisioned ourselves as whippersnappers is very different than the way that we are now. And I think a lot of that is just kind of coming to terms with it and being like, it's okay. Like the job that we envisioned in our 20s just doesn't exist anymore, right? So we have to have new goals and, new aspirations.
absolutely. I felt like, at 2010, the whole point of that was, that we were all going to be editors in chief and, for fancy lunches by 2010. And that sort of happened, but
that's right. We got to take, I never actually made it to editor in chief. I was number 2 for a very long time, for at least 12 years, I think. And I really love that number 2 job, right? Because it's like you got to do all the fun without having all the responsibility. But I wanted to taste that, which is like a lot of what that Gen X article was about, was that, like we all had these goals to reach this certain height, right? And then it was kind of like stripped away from us, whether that was creative director or filmmaker or editor in chief or any of these other creative industries, that things have changed so rapidly. And the industries have changed so rapidly. But at the same time, we're just different. It's just, we have to accept being different, like I was saying before. But yeah, it's kind of wild. Like I didn't think that I was going to be in 2025, that I was going to be a recruiter and a career coach. That's for sure. Although, of course, now that I look back, it makes perfect sense based on, my past, organizing people in the industry. Of course, that lends itself to knowing people to be able to hire them. And I've been coaching my entire career. When I was a whippersnapper, I was coaching college kids. And then when, I was more junior, then I was doing the whippersnappers. And, now I'm talking to all of them. So, yeah. It all works out in the end. If it's not the end, or if it's like, what do they say? It all works out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out, then it's not yet the end.
People are telling us there are threats coming from different directions, right? You have this idea that, number one, the technologies are always changing. The thing I've been telling myself to feel better is the idea that the skill that I used to master the previous version is the same skill I would use to master the next one. But my question to you is, what do you think we should be focusing on if you sort of see a massive change coming on the horizon? Is it developing skills? Is it actually asking the whippersnappers? Like maybe it's better to find out what the hot trend is than it is to sort of lean on your years of experience. How do you think someone should be prepared to be agile as things are changing?
I mean, I think that the most important skill that you can have is the ability to want to continue to learn. When you say, I just can't deal with that AI. It's just too much. I just can't. I just can't. Right. That is where you get into trouble. It is just not losing that curiosity and being insatiable to learn. If you don't lose that, then you're going to be fine. Right. And of course, for different people, like what they're going to learn is going to be different. But we all, even the whippersnappers, have to constantly be changing and flexing and morphing themselves in their careers, right? So I'm working with my daughter who's in college, right? And she's like still thinking that she's going to have this job when she graduates that she's going to do for the rest of her life, which is very unrealistic, right? But everybody still has this dream. Even when I'm coaching people in their 40s and 50s, what I often hear is, how can I get the next job that I'm going to die in? And I'm like, it's just not, that's just not what it is anymore, right? You're going to get the next job for the next 5 years. And then you're going to learn on the job, and you're going to smell which way the wind is going, and you're going to capture whatever you need to learn and grow, and then shift to the next thing, right? I mean, I'm just sorry. That's the new reality. That in order to be marketable, you have to constantly be evolving. So the greatest skill is to be open to that and willing to learn.
Do you also have to be open to salary deflation as you get older, and you're suddenly the newbie in using AI? So are you bumping back down?
I mean, in some cases, yes. I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, a lot of the creative roles that we wanted to work in and aspired to work in, the salaries on those are lower than what they paid for our mid-level roles when we were working in them 10, 15, sometimes 20 years ago. There's no question. Like, it's just changed. And now with all this economic uncertainty, there aren't a lot of big jobs with big money that are full-time with benefits that are in creative fields. I'm not saying that there aren't. There's just aren't a lot. There aren't as many as there are people that deserve to have them, right? That's the problem. So we can look at it as settling. Yes, like that I have to take this job. But most people at a certain time in their life, right, do that exchange of lifestyle versus and happiness and freedom versus high paycheck, high demand. So most people that I work with, not that anybody wants to be poor, not that anybody doesn't want to be able to, have their lifestyle or live in their house or be able to afford to go on vacation or whatever. But most people that I work with are willing to take a pay cut, even sometimes a significant pay cut, if they feel like they are taking a job that they feel good about. They feel like they're doing good, or it's scratching a creative itch, or yes. I mean, and that's better than the alternative of doing a job that maybe you're going to go back to school and be an accountant and make a lot of money. I don't know. Do accountants still make a lot of money? I don't even know. It's not even my area of expertise, but in my mind's eye, true. It's going to be an AI job. What is it going to be an AI job? But yeah, I do think that it's reality, unfortunately. How we're going to solve for that, I'm not sure. I do think that there's a lot of jobs that AI is never going to be able to do, or not to be able to do as well. And I think that AI, not that you asked me about AI, but just to talk about AI, because everybody's talking about AI, I can feel, if I have to make a prediction, is that AI might actually end up helping us as a creative workforce, because it will make the jobs for the really creative people scarce. And you're like, well, how's that going to help? I think that's going to weed out the people who want to work in content, who want to, but aren't good at it. We have a lot of really low bar content creators that have been born since the internet was born. So back in the day, there was a gatekeeping, right? Like, you couldn't get in to work at a national magazine, or to work for a broadcast channel, or to work, at the New York Times. These places were gatekeepers. You couldn't publish things on your own, right? So it was very select and very hard and competitive in industry, which made the industry really high level. The content and the quality of the work was very high level. And then when everybody could do it, there were like too many people, right? And I kind of feel like it will become, once people who realize that their jobs can be replaced by AI in content, will be forced to go someplace else. So then you're left with the cream of the crop. Now, that seems like a very elitist way of looking at it. but it also just kind of goes, it takes you back, right? It takes you back to a time where it will be the real creativity and the storytelling that is original, that can only be done by humans, will only be done by the humans that are the best at it. So I think that in the end will be better for the field, if that makes sense.
Obviously, right now, there's a lot of people feeling unfulfilled, but there's also a lot of layoffs still happening, and there seem to be concerns about that continuing. What kinds of things should people be doing if they are potentially going to be impacted by a layoff or have been laid off? What's the first thing they should be doing, and how can they sort of?
I think the first thing you should do is to take a mental break and turn off everything. I mean, just for a practical standpoint, I think that a lot of people that come to me, they come to me like even before their last day, right? They get laid off, and I'm like their first call, and they say, "Oh my God, I have to get another job." And I understand. I was exactly the same way when I was laid off, and I've been laid off 3 times. When I was laid off, I was like, it was absolutely panicked. Don't panic, or that's what you say, but I was absolutely panicked. Like, what am I going to do next? And I need to get started on it right away. But I think that we're so clouded with panic that that makes it really challenging to get started and to understand who you are and where you should be moving forward. So I think that if you can, like, take a week. And I do know some people that like literally will take retreats, like silent retreats, or, whether it's like somebody's organizing them, or, you don't want to be paying the money at that time, that you just like literally go in the woods and just like go on a long walk or whatever it is. So decompress is the very first thing. Then you have to start exploring, what do I want to do? And that really goes back to a combination of things. Like, where were you the most happy in your past jobs? Like, really try to think about that. Like, what do you enjoy doing? And then, is that also what you're good at doing? They don't necessarily always align, but what do I love doing? What am I good at doing? And what roles was I the happiest in the role? And what was that? Was it the people? Was it the type of work I was doing? Was it the pace of the work? Like, what was it? So diving into that, I think, is really important. Writing it out helps people. And then looking to see where you feel like you were the happiest. And then think, okay, so I really like writing quippy copy. I don't like heavily researched. I like fun, quippy storytelling, or just the opposite. I really like to just be overwhelmed with data and research and to find the story in that. I just love that part of it, right? Because different people have different things, whatever it is. Maybe you love the visuals and that you love telling stories visually. And homing in on that, I think, is the most important thing. And then it's crafting all of your materials. So, you have to market yourself now, right? Once you're out there in the world, you've got to be marketing yourself through your resume, obviously, but most importantly on LinkedIn, and then to everybody that you know. So you can't even do that until you know what the hell it is you want to do, because you want people to help you. And if you don't know, then they don't know, right? So a lot of that is starting with yourself and figuring out what it is that you want to do before you even think what is out there. That makes sense.
What I think is really interesting about the way you described it is you weren't focusing on a vertical. You weren't saying, I want to work in fashion. You were actually taking it to a level of specificity beyond that, which is, I want to have this kind of a voice and these kind of a feel in my day-to-day work, which I think a lot of us don't do. We just kind of get this idea that we're in this pool and that anything in that pool would be okay.
Right. Well, that's not the way we hire, though, right? So even though I am a big believer in subject matter expertise, I feel like people, when recruiters, which I also a recruiter or hiring manager, which you've probably both been hiring managers at some point, when you go to hire, you are hiring for somebody that can do a very specific thing, always. Even if it's several very specific things, it's always very specific. And if the person has an enormous amount of experience, which we all do by the time we're in our 40s and 50s, you can't expect for the hiring manager to um, dig through all of your stuff and find the parts that most apply to that job. People are lazy, let's just say. Like even me, when I'm looking at people, I want it to be right in my face what it is that they're good at and they want to do. So if you have to dig around and find it, um, and you don't know how to articulate it yourself to that hiring manager, then they're not going to figure it out for you. The only exception is if it's somebody that you used to work with who already knows you and knows what you're good at when maybe you don't even realize what you're good at, right? And that does happen a lot, right? Some old boss moves on to work for some brand, and you don't have experience working in brand marketing, but they know that you would be good at it because they know your skills. But most of us don't have, that luck, right? Um, so we have to define it for ourselves because nobody else is going to do it.
And how important, I know you did some research with your survey for this year. How important is the network versus, I know a lot of people who keep applying on LinkedIn and get
the worst thing that you can do, what not to do when looking for a new job, is to sit down at LinkedIn at 9 o'clock in the morning, and look up every job with your skills in it and apply to every single one, and then get off LinkedIn at 5 o'clock. That's the worst thing you can do, and it also will drive you absolutely insane, right? Because LinkedIn is a wonderful place for connecting with people, but a terrible place for applying to a job. And it does kind of feel like everybody else has gotten to the jobs before you. Like it feels like everybody else has a job and you don't have a job. Like it's just like psychologically, it can be terrible. But what I found in the survey that I do a survey every single year. Well, I should say every single year. It's only been 5 years that I've been running the Talent Fairy. And I ask people, how did you get your next job? Very plainly. And 30% do, in fact, get their next job through applying blindly, meaning that they didn't know anybody, which is extraordinarily high. Let's just say that out loud. Most industries, and this is only for people that identify as being editors, writers, content creators, content managers, strategists. So journalists, editorial people, content marketing people. You couldn't answer the survey unless you're one of those people. Most of those people got their jobs, 70%, through somebody that they know. The 30% got their job because it was blind. I believe that the 30% is so high among those people is because we know how to communicate better than maybe, my husband, who is a nanotechnologist. Like, forget it. He can't write a cover letter. So I think that we can break through a little bit easier. So that's why the 30% is a little bit higher. Also because we are forced to move outside of our industry and apply. So, it's a new industry in which we're applying in, which I can discuss more. So they're more open to outside people to be hiring. But 70% is huge, right? So if you think about it, like most people spend 90% of their time applying to jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever the platform is, and 10% networking. Really what you should be doing, if you want to think about it proportionally, you should be spending 70% at least of your time networking and connecting with real people, and 30% blind applying to jobs that are a unique fit for you. In fact, I almost believe that you should spend 100% of the time reaching out to people that you've worked with, that you know, that you admire, that are in your LinkedIn network, and building that network and using LinkedIn to find those people, but not using it necessarily to apply to jobs that everybody else is applying to, that may ghost you, maybe ghost jobs, 7,000 applications, all the things, right? And especially right now when the market is so unstable and uncertain, it's better to be building the relationships. So then when the opportunities do open up again, then you're ready and you're there.
What about if you're just feeling unfulfilled? Is now still a good time to be looking?
Now is not the best time to, maybe if you have a job that's paying you a decent salary and health insurance, maybe don't quit it right now. Like, I don't know. I think that maybe not be a good idea. But certainly a lot of people don't have that luxury. So while it's not the best market right now, it always changes. It always goes back up. Yes, the jobs are going to be different. Yes, things are going to be changed. Yes, you have to be, nimble, all those things. But, we all usually manage to find a way. They do come back. The market right now, we're just uncertain, right? So people are afraid to hire because they don't know what's going to happen next. Once that changes, and it will change, then there will be a hiring boom again. But yeah, we're just kind of in a holding pattern right now, which is why people are not buying toothpaste. And
Not toothpaste.
yeah, I just read that today and I thought, really, people are cutting back on toothpaste? Like, that seems like particularly dire, doesn't it? Maybe because we're only on social, so people can't smell our breath. Like,
It makes me wonder if there's a recipe going around on TikTok for make your own toothpaste, because I can't imagine people are absolutely forgoing it.
Like baking soda and some
baking soda. There you go. There you go. Baking soda. Yeah.
Networking does not come easy to everybody, especially if they're not super social, if they're more a text-based person per se. How
Yep.
how do you do it without feeling awkward?
I think the number one problem with networking is the word networking. Is you just when you say it, I still think I'm at a cocktail party. I'm standing by myself in a corner. I've got my business card, even though nobody has them anymore. In my mind's eye, that's what it is. Like you're awkwardly want to go up and talk to some person of importance. And it doesn't matter if you're 50 years old or you're 22. Like, right. Like it's just like that awkwardness of like having to start a conversation with somebody new. And nobody likes that. Like nobody is good at that. Like it's not, humans want to be connected, but we're not very good at like those awkward moments, right? But that's not what I think of when I think of networking. I think of networking as being, and where it's effective is not in those kind of situations, right? Like how many times has that ever really worked when you've gone up, to somebody at an event and talked to them, with a glass of wine in your hand and pitched yourself to them and they've hired you? It doesn't really happen that way. The best way that it works is through the connections and the people that you already have. And I think that sometimes we overlook the people that we have in our life and think like, I already know them. If they had a job for me, they would have given it to me years ago, right? But often people don't know what you need from them. And not to say that they exist there just to help you, but if you understand where you want to be and what you want to do next, then I can call you up, Lisa, and be like, oh my gosh, I haven't talked to you in a couple of years. What are you up to? What are you doing now? What's your job like? What's responsibilities? And I'm asking you about you. Then if you come back and say, which unless you're a psychopath, you will come back and say, so Chandra, what are you doing? What do you want to do? And then I can very clearly say, I am looking for a job where I can do storytelling for a beauty brand. I really want to be working in beauty. I've been doing beauty my whole life. And I just think that I'd be really great at writing, giving the names for nail polishes or whatever. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I can see you doing that. And then, we hang up. We don't talk for, 3 or 4 weeks. And you are at a cocktail party with somebody who's like, oh my God, I have to hire somebody who can write these stupid names for this, for these nail polishes. And you're like, oh my God, I was just talking to this woman a few weeks ago. She could be great. That's what you need to do, right? And you got to do that over and over and over again. So it's a real conversation. It's a real connection. It's a person that you know, that you trust, and that they know how to advocate for you, right? It's not that we end that conversation and Lisa's like, oh, I don't know. Well, it was nice talking to her. Good luck to her, but you don't know what it is that I want. So that's what you have to do. And it's not so much about selling yourself. It's just being honest and authentic about what it is that you're looking for. And you don't have to say, well, if you hear of anything, let me know, which is what everybody wants to say. You don't even have to say that, right? Like you've planted it in their minds and then they unknowingly will go out and become your publicist. That's the goal.
One of the things I think is really interesting about your advice is it's actually inward looking first, and then
Mhm.
it's connecting. I think most of us, when we're panicked, our tendency is to like look outside. I'll take anything, I'll do anything, anything. And what you seem to be advising is number one, don't take it personally. It's happening to everyone. And our idea of where we should be in our career was possibly skewed and wrong. So, don't take it personally. It's not about you. Now make it about you and talk to people about you.
Yes, actually, I have never articulated it so well. Like, you're right. That is what I'm saying, but I didn't actually think about that. Yeah, you do have to figure it out for yourself first, because nobody can help you unless you know what the hell it is that you want, right? And you can't retrofit yourself into jobs. Like, people are always trying to do that, right? Like there's a bazillion jobs on LinkedIn out there. You can do a lot of them if they're in your area, right? They're in content, but there are a bazillion jobs in content, right? Like, what are you uniquely qualified for? What is this little strip? You are much more likely to get this little strip than you are to just blanket all of that, right? So being strategic about that is really, really important. Sometimes it's scary for people because, like you said, it seems that it just to spray your resume and to like send out the mass email that's like, I'm looking. So then, as if like it's like a blow it into a magazine, or like the flyer on that comes at your door from the guy that wants to do your roof. It's just like, oh, if I go to every single house in the neighborhood, somebody's going to need to get their roof fixed. It doesn't really work that way, at least not in my experience in this industry.
Well, and I think in most industries, I did not hire a roofer from a hire, so from somebody I know, actually. So, so any other last advice that we should add?
I said, don't be deflated, don't panic. Good, good advice. It is. We are all in the same boat, and we have to just kind of go with the flow. And let me tell you, I am type A. I do not go with the flow very well. So it's easy, like, for me to say, but I have learned that if I don't go with the flow, then I am going to really like not be able to open my mind to what is next. Right? If you are too rigid, if you're not willing to learn, then you're going to be stuck. So allow yourself to go with the flow. Allow yourself to take, especially if you're unemployed, all kinds of random jobs and all kinds of random opportunities. Like, your brother-in-law is a real estate agent and needs his website redesigned or rewritten or whatever, right? And so trying out new ways to use your skills, never think anything is beneath you, because you never know how that can build, right? So, like, say yes to everything, kind of. Allow yourself to explore, allow yourself to do things that maybe you're not going to get a lot of money from, or maybe sometimes even no money. Not that I want people working for free, but allowing yourself to tiptoe into other areas, I think, is really important. And allow yourself to explore, because that's how you stumble into people who could potentially hire you and help you. So as much as you can get out there in any capacity, I think is great.
So volunteer work for
even volunteer work. Oh, totally. Like, maybe it's that the school needs somebody to run their social media, right? And it's not so much that you suddenly are going to have that social media experience, but maybe you meet somebody through the process of doing that. Who knows? So, but being at home and just applying for LinkedIn jobs is definitely not going to do it. At least not most of the time.
This is a slight aside, but the fact that you can see how many people have applied for a job, I think, is one of the single most dispiriting pieces of digital functionality I have ever encountered.
And it's all smoke and mirrors anyway, because the people are so many AI bots now can apply to jobs, and so many people can apply to jobs using AI, that those numbers are completely out of whack. And so many of those people that apply to the jobs are not qualified for the jobs. I can tell you that because I'm reading them on the other side as a recruiter. And it's like 90% of the people that apply to those jobs are qualified to begin with. So there's all those things. So don't believe those numbers. Just ignore them.
That's actually,
That's great to know.
yeah.
Yeah. It's all a lie. It's all a lie.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. I really
Absolutely.
appreciate it. I think you've given us a lot of great advice for anyone who is, looking for a job or worried about their job and, trying to think about maybe being proactive about what to do next. So,
Great.
Especially after they read something terrifying in the New York Times.
Yeah, no kidding. That's right. Right. Just stick your head in the sand. I'm just joking. Lovely chatting with you both. All
wonderful to chat with you too. Thanks so much again.
right.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. That was a really great interview. I came away from it feeling very excited, actually, and empowered. I hope that anyone listening did as well.
Absolutely. She's so fantastic at really being realistic about what's happening, but also being very encouraging and positive and giving really good advice that I really hadn't thought of as far as how to brand myself and look for the next project or job that really suits me.
Yeah, and I think even listening to her, obviously we have a very specific focus in our careers, but it felt to me like those are approaches that anybody can use, whatever their field is.
Absolutely. Yeah, everyone. I think even if you're a lawyer, although I think they're in demand, but you no matter what kind of career you're in, I think you can probably take something away from there. And her networking advice is fantastic too, because that's always a awkward thing, especially if you are, in the market for a job. You don't want to. It feels awkward to go talk to people and say, hey, have you heard of
Yes.
anything? You feel like you're desperate, but
Yeah, I agree. It really helped you take that stink of desperation out of the whole hunt for for connection with people.
right, because especially the way she did it, where it's so subtle and you don't have to, lead with, "I've been laid off. What can I do? Do you have a job for me?"
Well, and for me, it actually like flipped the way I think of it because my tendency is to be like, I can do anything. Like, just get, I'll figure it out. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. I thought it was really comforting to sort of think back to the things you were really good at and really interested in and aim for those as opposed to that sort of broad reach for whatever because nobody knows what to do with that. She's right.
No, no. You need to focus and find what works best for you, and that's hopefully then going to be the perfect job that will last for a while. So,
Exactly. Yeah, this was definitely a don't panic. So I thought it turned out really well.
yes, I feel much less panicked about this. Even though
And if there
I'm fortunate to have wonderful clients right now. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, it's always easier when you're in a good place to think about it.
yes, yes, it is. But hopefully, I can just re-listen to this when something goes awry. So,
And to that end, if anyone out there has something they'd like us to look into that they're feeling panicked about and would like to be pulled back from the brink, please reach out. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
yes, thanks for joining us at Don't Panic.